Far Cry 5 is finally here to take us on a grand adventure into the wilderness of Montana. In this fictional region of the state known as Hope County, a congregation is forming at an alarming rate as it slowly becomes an apocalyptic cult. Dive into a wild story filled with action and adventure as you try to liberate those being held captive and stopping the project at Eden's Garden. Far Cry 5 opens up in a fictional region of Montana called Hope County. In this previously quiet region is a growing congregation known as the Project at Eden's Garden. This congregation, bordering into the lines of a cult, is led by a preacher named Joseph Seed. Seed has convinced his followers that doomsday is coming and that only he can be the one to save them. Those who refuse to join are forced to or are killed, relieved of their sins. Joseph, who leads the cult, shares the reins of it with his siblings John, Jacob, and Faith, each of which own their own region of the cult. You play as the sheriff's deputy, who's referred to by other characters as Rookie. You, along with the rest of the task force, is sent to arrest Joseph Seed, putting an end to the congregation. Upon arresting Joseph, though, things take a quick turn for the worse as the task force is quickly outnumbered by the absurd amount of followers at the congregation's disposal. The task force is taken captive, but not before you escape and run into some of the citizens of Hope County, still rebelling against the cult. Together with the rising rebellion, you go after Joseph and his siblings. You're taking this land back one way or another. While the story isn't as memorable to the likes of Far Cry 3, the cast of characters were diverse and interesting with the exception of yourself. You're a silent protagonist, and that definitely hurts the story and the connection to them as a character. On the bright side, your character can now be customized with some minor clothing and body options, including gender. With that said, the extra customization features don't outweigh the benefits of a solidified character with the speaking role. Luckily, the remaining cast of characters pick up the slack with a variety of characters. The Seed family is intimidating with Joseph at the forefront. His sister is a Harley Quinn clone from Montana, his brother John is a hot-headed leader that occasionally needs to be put in check, while Jacob is the soldier figure in the family. It's surely not the best story in the series, but it's a solid one that made exploring the rural parts of the United States really entertaining with a great climax conclusion. The formula that Far Cry 3 solidified with invading outposts continues on in Far Cry 5, and it's just as fun. Like previous Far Cry games before it, you're dropped into this open world that's going to be your playground for the next 26 hours or so. Rather than taking place in some island in Indonesia or in the Himalayas, you're exploring a sectioned off area of the United States in the heart of Montana. The new setting feels much more realistic than previous backdrops. The designers of the game did a great job interlinking the different sections and regions of the game together. Perhaps it could be that I've actually been to parts of the United States that look like this before, and not the Himalayas, but this game did feel like the positioning of everything was just right. The sense of realism made the experience and narrative much more realistic and immersive. Now, while the setting may take a change, the gameplay for the most part is really familiar here. If you played Far Cry 3, 4, or even parts of Primal, you'll see a lot of those gameplay elements in this game. It did indeed feel the same with a new setting in the background and a new face on the villain building up an army. I found the formula to continue to be fun, but for those of you that were tired of liberating outposts, going after really out there villains, and just trying to explode everything with a hazard flammable sign, then this just may not be the game for you. Heck, Far Cry may not be the series for you. What does change in the gameplay is the way the story progresses, or is rather structured. This time around, the open world is broken up into 3 regions, each being led by one of the Seed siblings. It's an interesting structure for the Far Cry series, but it works really well. I found the region structure to give the game a better foundation and ultimately, better pacing in terms of story progression. You're given the freedom to choose which region you want to tackle first, but the game does give you a recommendation. You can think of each region as a kingdom that slowly has to be whittled down. As you enter a region, you're supposed to help liberate and save those who are captive in that region, usually indicated with a trail of smoke going up into the air. While you're doing all of these missions, you aren't the typical one-man army that the previous games have been. Far Cry 5 has a guns for hire system that allows for cooperation with a specialist soldier, each with their own unique quirks for battle. There's a total of 9 characters, and depending on the situation you're taking care of, some are more suited for certain situations than others. The standard enemy AI and NPCs for that matter can use a bit of work though. I've seen so many enemies run into walls and NPCs just driving down the road and hitting any car on the opposite side of the lane. It's baffling to see. You also have the option to play co-op with a friend via online, making the game much more fun but also chaotic. The only issue with it though is the progression system. For some reason, if I invite my friend to play with me, I'll get credit for completing the mission, but they won't. They'd have to invite me to their game and we'd have to replay the mission all over again for them to get credit too. It's a really odd design choice that forces you to replay missions twice with different hosts. The new story structure felt more open and freeing to me as a player. I actually found myself getting more lost in the side quests than usual with this new entry, partially because of how the game world feels much more connected, and that goes as far as the writing for these side quests. Constantly I'd be driving to my next waypoint for the story only to run into an NPC character telling me that someone is being attacked just off the road. The side quests aren't always just combat missions though. You'll occasionally get a puzzle themed mission that has you use the environment and clues to find treasures. Speaking of treasures and currency, let's talk about the progression system. You can use currency to purchase items such as grenades and throwing knives, things that can help you out in combat. The perk system is now entirely handled with perk points that are earned by completing challenges in the game. These challenges can be something like kill a certain amount of enemies with a certain weapon. It's almost like an in-game achievement system basically. These perk points then unlock new perks like being able to use a parachute every time you're free falling or having a bit more health. This is also the area where microtransactions get introduced. You can use real-world money to buy in-game currency to unlock cosmetic items like clothes for your character. You can of course unlock these by collecting in-game currency in the game rather than using microtransactions, but the option is still there. The last part of the progression system that really changed is the crafting system. It's no longer as prominent of a feature as other games. I actually like this a lot more as I spent less time looking for flowers and more time shooting and blowing stuff up. You can still craft and go hunting for animals, but you're not forced to as much. Outside of the campaign is the game's map editor called Farcry Arcade. Here you can build single, co-op, or competitive maps that you can share with people online. Likewise, if you're not the creative type, you can just jump online and play other people's creations too. It's a fun distraction for moments that keep the chaos of Far Cry 5 but breaks the rules set by the game's narrative. It's certainly an in-depth enough tool for some stellar experiences, but with that said, for the time being you'll have to have the skill and patience to create something interesting. Considering Ubisoft has said that they're looking to support arcade for months to come, I fully expect a Battle Royale mode to be out in the future, but that's just a prediction on my part. Far Cry 5 is a nice looking game in terms of the open world genre, but it's certainly not on the level of other titles in that genre. It's up there with the likes of The Division's gritty visuals, but certainly not up there in the same grounds of Assassin's Creed Origins or Horizon Zero Dawn. Far Cry 5 is available on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and all three platforms vary in performance. On the base PS4, the game runs at 1080p 30 and what looks like 900p 30 on the base Xbox One. On the enhanced platforms, the PS4 Pro runs the game at about 1600p with 30 FPS, and 1800p on the Xbox One X with also 30 FPS. Now across all the platforms including PC, there seems to be this general pop-in issue, even on higher end PC hardware. It becomes most noticeable when you're traversing an area on a fast vehicle like a helicopter or a car, driving through a field of spawning flowers. Far Cry has always been a series that encourages the player to blow stuff up when they can, and surprisingly it runs pretty well in this game. Even when near crazy large explosions, the game manages to maintain its performance with a minimal to no frame rate dip. You're essentially getting Just Cause 3 level explosions without Just Cause 3 level frame rate dips. Far Cry 5's soundtrack is a mix of fast action paced songs, old folk tunes, and patriotic tunes in a gospel format. The range of different music themes in this game is pretty wide and usually assigned according to the moment. The main menu, for example, has a soft folk tune that really is peaceful, though when you jump into a firefight the music gets more pumped up while keeping up with that hint of old folk guitar tunes in there. It's almost like an angry banjo. As for the voice acting, there's a solid performance from the core cast of characters, with Joseph in particular, nailing the feeling of uneasiness when he speaks softly. There is this one general issue with the game though, and that's the 3D sound or the direction of the sound in the game. While sometimes it works, for example, someone on your left sounds like they're on your left, there is this bug that makes it sound like the audio is being played through a loudspeaker and then being restreamed. Hopefully that's patched up soon. Far Cry 5 doesn't do a lot to change the core gameplay formula that the series has been known for over the last 3 installments, so if you weren't too happy with it before, you may not be into this one. With that said, I personally am a fan of it and welcome the minor changes to the story structure of the game. Breaking the game up into regions that you slowly whittled down felt more freeing while still being easy to understand the story progression of the game. It also makes it easier to find new side quests and get lost in a much more interconnected world. Visuals look good for a modern Far Cry game, but it's certainly not the prettiest modern open world game out there right now. The same can be said with the narrative in this installment. Generally, Far Cry 5 is a fun game that can be entertained with its interesting story and amusing gameplay. There are some minor nitpicks here with the visuals and audio, like the pop-in throughout the environment and the odd audio bugs. The biggest issue I had was the derpy AI though. Ultimately, Far Cry 5 is a solid shooter that I had a great time with and recommend you check out, though if you aren't a fan of the way the game series was structured before, this one probably won't change your mind. And if you're waiting for a villain that can finally compete with the likes of Voss from Far Cry 3, this isn't that game. That does it for my review of Far Cry 5 for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. If you have any questions about the game or upcoming games you'd like me to review, let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a like. It helps YouTube actually push the video out to subscribers, and I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.